Long ago, the world of Ara descended into chaos, and paradise was lost. False gods from the unseen realm deceived the people of Ara, stealing their birthright. Mortals roamed the wasteland, hopelessly searching for purpose. And that brings us to me, a celestial guardian, sent as a light piercing the darkness. My name is Gabriel.
What up, what up, what up? How's it going out there? You got Jason Moody, you got David Cunningham, creators of Gabriel and the Guardians. We're here to talk to you guys about stuff. Right, David?
That's right. We're going to talk about stuff. Lots of stuff tonight.
Stuff. Characters, man. Which is what you need for a good story, right? Good characters.
I mean, generally, right? Like, if you don't really have characters, you know.
Yeah, so if you don't know, Gabriel and the Guardians is an animated series that is inspired by Hebrew scripture, but it takes place in a fantasy world inspired by the legends and lore of the world of Genesis. There you go, succinctly detailed. And so I think we got some cool stuff. We're going to be showing some cool designs, early designs. You guys are going to see some like old stuff from, when I say old, I mean like 2020. So not too old, but oldish. And we're going to talk about how David got onto this project and how he transformed it into the beautiful, awesome fantasy story that it is today.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right.
And yeah, we also got an announcement that we're going to talk about at the end for something really cool happening at the end of next week. So that's also gonna be pretty fun. So stay tuned.
Yep. So I think that what we got to do right now is talk a little bit about testing the waters, because we are in the middle of testing the waters, and for this thing to happen, and for us to be able to move forward and make this awesome show that we've been working on and planning on, and that honestly has been put in our hearts to steward, we need your help. We need your help. We need you to share it and blast it out and get your friends and get anybody that you know that likes anime, or just anybody you know that likes good stories inspired by timeless truths. Send it out, man. Please help us out, you know. And so we want to talk about that. Talk about the old testing the waters.
Yeah. So, you know, many of you are familiar with Angel Studios' model. Angel Studios isn't like Netflix or Hulu that, you know, buy shows and have like mountains of money, it seems like. And they give filmmakers, you know, really nothing. Instead, we're partnered with Angel Studios to distribute, you know, our show. And as filmmakers, we work with you to help create the show, which is, you know, like a really unique process. I mean, Netflix doesn't, you know, do this kind of thing where they actually talk to you about what's going on with the show and involve you and kind of show you behind the scenes kind of thing. And that's something that's really been on our heart as well, and something that Angel shares. And it's just, we're super excited about to be able to do this kind of thing. So right now, you can express your interest in Gabriel and the Guardians by going to angel.com/guardians. And this will allow us to see if anyone is interested in helping us fund this show. We're exploring opening up a crowdfund round. And like many other projects have done this in the past, if we feel like that right now is the good time for that, and there is interest there, then we'll open up a crowdfunding round where you can invest in the project and actually own equity or stock. So if you express interest, you'll be the first to know if that happens.
Own an anime. Be an owner. Right?
Yeah.
How cool would that be? Own an anime. Own your own anime. Thank you, David. That was exquisite. Exquisitely done, my friend. And so I shared a little bit last time about how this got started. I was just an average dude, right? Living in the Midwest, had never been out to Hollywood before. I don't have any connections to that. But I had this idea, you know, during COVID, I talked about we all had the weird thing that we did first. Mine was I made puppets with my kids, and then I kind of finally zoned in on like, oh, you know what? I have this idea. I've been really into the Old Testament, really into Genesis, listening to some cool podcasts, and I felt inspired. And 3-4 years later, here we are. You know what I mean? And that was with no connections. That was just going for it and feeling like the Lord said, yes, I want you to make this. I want you to tell my stories in a way that's fresh and reaches an audience that otherwise hasn't been able to been reached. And so I started running, and the doors were opened, and one of those doors was David Cunningham. So, David, you want to, from your perspective, tell how we got together? I think it would be fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, similar to Jason, like I've never been to Hollywood. I grew up mostly in South Carolina. That's where I live now. And I always wanted to make films. I grew up as a kid, just making films every weekend. I did that like through college, because it was like super fun. Like, and we did like a lot of spoofs on movies that, me and my friends like, that kind of thing. But I always was like, man, like I'd really like to make movies one day. And, it's, how many people think that, right? And then it's like, what do you do about that? Like, do you move to LA and like, try to do the whole Hollywood thing? And I was like, I don't ever really want to do that. It just seemed, I don't know. It just seemed kind of like crazy to try and do that whole kind of thing. So, I prayed about it for a while. Back in, gosh, I mean, like for me, like I think I mentioned this in the last live stream, but this has been kind of like a 16-year journey for me of pursuing this goal and working towards it, going to grad school, and then besides grad school, just working really hard in learning how to be a good storyteller, because I don't just want to make mediocre stories or bad stories. I want to make really good stories. I love good movies. I love good stories, and I want to make something that's awesome. And to do that, you have to learn from who is the best. So like I spent a lot of time, many, many years, studying what makes a good story. How do you tell a good story? So anyway, fast forward to when I met Jason last January, I believe. And so I was working on a series that you might be familiar with, the Wingfeather Saga, which is an awesome show, has an awesome crew and team behind it, and just super cool. Such a fun show. I was working there, and I got a message out of the blue on LinkedIn from this guy who I'd never met before, never heard of before. And I think he said something like, I heard that you're a writer, and I have a story that I could use some help with. And the first thing I messaged back was, who told you that? Because like somebody random on LinkedIn messaged you and he's like, I heard you're a writer. I was like, what? So
who's this weirdo?
Exactly. I was like, So anyway, jumped on a call, and we started talking, and just really kind of hit it off. And then we basically just started, passing story ideas back and forth, nights, weekends, and just kind of like wasn't really sure where this thing was going to go. But Jason, do you want to kind of pick it up from there?
Sure, man. I mean, so I had started working on a story, right? I had some traction. Again, not really having connections. I randomly, as David said, I randomly would just message people on LinkedIn and be like, oh, that person worked on something cool. Maybe they could give me some ideas on how I, go about the task of making a cartoon, from scratch. And so David was one of those people that I reached out to after actually at some point I had someone that actually responded and said, sure, I'll look at what you got, and then he basically looked at it and came back and said, hey, this is actually pretty good. And then from there he helped me, and then he gave me David's name because David, they knew each other. And so I reached out to David and I said, well, actually, I know you're the guy, And David was like, oh, okay, well, all right. So, but what I needed really was help, because I'm not really a writer. And I knew I had a basic concept for a story and the world that I wanted to create. But David brought a lot to the table, in terms of crafting a story that had good characters. And one of the first things that you did, man, was like you looked at these different characters of different ages, and you were like, what if you created like a team of like 3 characters? What if these 3 characters were the main characters? And I was like, oh, that's cool. That could be pretty cool, actually. So I feel like, though, we should probably start showing some of these characters so we can talk about it. And real quick, I do want to say, because someone asked about Mr. Al. Yeah, Al will not be making it onto this live stream. He has a personal family issue that actually, if you guys could be praying for him and his family, that would be awesome. So, yeah. All right. So, Gabriel and the Guardians. The first page is out of our branding guide. So, there you go. There's a brand that I tossed in there. But we can go to the next slide. So, this was the original cover to the first pitch deck when I didn't even know what a pitch deck was. Literally, I was like, what do I do with this idea? And I heard the Lord say, make a pitch deck. And I was like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. So I looked it up and found some cool pitch decks out online from other shows. And I started working on one, being an artist, an amateur artist, and a designer by trade. I went to the work of creating something. So this is an old. You can see Gabriel looks pretty different here, and that's an early design for, and then an early design for Zophiel, which is another angel. If you know your angel, encyclopedia, there's Uriel and Zophiel and Raphael. All the good ones end in L, and. So over here, though, this is a really early knock character, proto knock, essentially. And so, if we go forward, we can take a look at some of this. Wait, go back 1 second. Down in the corner is a proto Nemea, really early Nemea design. So you can kind of see it in there. So yeah, we can go forward now. So basically, this character right down here on the right, this was our knock, and at the time, he was very much inspired by the character of Noah, and at the time it was even more like just closer to that Noah story. But David looked at this story that had this kind of young Noah, but not like young Noah. And I don't know, what were your thoughts? How did you come across the idea of like, what if he was a teenager? And like that, how'd that strike you?
Yeah, well, I mean, specifically, like, I think we had a conversation where I was just like, who's the audience here? Who are we trying to reach here? And we started talking about that, and it was like, what audience hasn't been reached from, I guess you could say like a perspective like ours, really, and it's like teenagers, like. Nobody's making stuff like this for teens. And so it's like, well, if we're going to make it for, like this is going to be like targeted towards, a teen audience, then the characters should be teenagers. It was just like, that's what it should be. Like,
what's funny about that is that I had already had this moment with my teenage daughter where I was showing her some of this stuff. And she was like, Dad, she's really into anime. And she's like, Dad, this is a show about Bible stories that I'd actually watch. And I was like, oh, like at that moment, I just felt the thumb in my back of like, okay, like that's when I felt that thing where the Lord was like, yeah, I want my stories told in a way that this whole generation can access it. And so it was cool. When you said like that was your perspective, I was like, that matches right up. That matches right up with why I felt like I needed to do this.
And there's something else. There's something else too that happened around this time as well, that we can talk about more. But it's the how did we pivot from this being like very like much more closely based on the Bible to a fantasy series inspired by Hebrew scriptures? Like, how do we make that pivot? And I think, I mean, like to just tell everybody here, like the basic reason is essentially like I've always looked at essentially how Jesus talked to crowds and how he used parables. Yeah. And how Jesus didn't talk to crowds and say the Genesis says this or Exodus says this, the writer here says that. He didn't say those things. He just
imagine a field and there's a farm and there's an owner. parable, man, story, and he would deep truths through parable. And I remember a conversation you and I had where you said you can try to tell people truth and run not even the risk, the definite predictable outcome of a lot of people going, nope, can't hear this. I already know what's true. I can't hear what you have to say. I don't believe that. But if you come to somebody and you go, once upon a time, and then you tell that same story, they're much more willing to go, oh, interesting. Okay, I'm going to listen to the story because you started with once upon a time. And so that's one of the things I was like, oh, that rocks. That's what a cool way to kind of take something, you want to talk about these things that you hold dear, but you don't want someone to immediately not listen because they just already have an opinion. They already don't believe. They are, this is what I think about that. I don't want to hear Bible stuff, blah, 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 right? So.
Yeah. No, that's 100% right. And like I've always looked at like C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, those two guys. I mean, like what they did is they took the truths, they took the values, they took, the faith, and then they created these fantasy stories that anyone can enjoy, because those stories are like it doesn't matter if what your faith is. Anybody can enjoy Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings. But they didn't compromise on their values when they wrote those stories, and that's our same goal here. That's what we're doing here, and that's the reason. That's the simple short version of like the pivot from being based on to a fantasy inspired by. Anyway, if you want to keep going through the slides,
let's go to the next thing. Good, that's good, man. Nice job.
Yeah.
So a little bit about the characters. This was back in the day. You got Gabriel, Michael, Zophiel. You see some cool art over here. And then of course Zion. Zion's cool. She's a cherub that is training to become a sentry in the garden realm, Paradem. So we can move forward.
Yeah, Zion is awesome in the series. I think you're gonna love her.
Remember, hey, I'm going to go on the edge here, David. Hey, remember when we thought about killing her on the first episode?
Yes. Yeah. Like, oh, what would be like really tragic? Like Zion dies the first episode. Yeah. And I was like, no, that'd be a terrible idea.
We got away with that. So early on when we were kind of working out these character types, you can see an older Noah, and then you can see Naama at the time. We changed the name. Tubal-Cain. So if you don't know, Naama or Naama, depending on how you like to pronounce it, she's a character from the Bible. We moved her away to slight difference to Nemea, right? Which is a fictional character inspired by Naama. But Naama is the sister of Tubal-Cain. And he had brothers, Jubal, Ubal, and Tubal-Cain, and these are the fathers of industry. Each one of them in the story of Genesis, one created basically music and culture. From him came music and culture. One came out of him agriculture. One came out of him metallurgy. They all are known as the fathers of metallurgy and different things. And Naamah was the sister. Their father was a king, according to some of the other Hebrew texts, and so she was a princess. And then in some other texts, I believe in the book of Jasher, it names Naamah as Noah's wife. And so it was like, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And so we started running down that story. In terms of just like, yeah.
No, I was gonna say just so everybody knows, these are all inspired by. So we're not following these exact storylines. In case you're wondering if Nock and Nemea are going to get married, that's something that again this is inspired by.
these are character types, right? Like, so
Yeah.
this is, working out the ideas of, if you're going to tell this story, what are the character types you want to pull? A Noah character type, a Naama character type, a Tubal-Cain character type. And then we pull a lot from other, all wrapped into the Hebrew culture. The thing is that Hebrew didn't exist on an island. The Hebrews didn't exist on an island. They existed in a world full of other cultures. So you've got Sumerian culture, you've got Assyrian culture. I mean, this is the more than likely. We know that Abraham was born in Ur, right? Like the Sumerians, the Sumerian capital, and so we're talking about these characters that existed at the beginning of the Mesopotamia era, and so. Pulling in some of those other culture myths, it's all wrapped in. They actually, some Sumerian, if you read some of the Sumerian myths, it's like, dude, it's crazy how much it ports over to some of the Genesis stories. And so this character here is called Humbaba. And if you look up Humbaba, you'll see that he's a really, really, really cool Sumerian monster. Yeah. And so we can move forward. I saw people talking about Azazel. Just don't look at that. Don't even pay attention. But characters change, and David came on, and we started thinking about him differently. And so now we move into, this is the next phase. We're talking like a year and a half later. I'm working with David, and we're redesigning the characters according to the way the story has now morphed. And so now we've got, this young man character named Neoach, which is actually Hebrew for Noah, but we're calling him Noach, right? And he's not Noah, but he is the Noah archetype. And then you've got Gabriel, and then you've got Nemea. And so this is the next phase, where it's like, you saw those early designs, and we're kind of, how do we bring this together? How do we make this feel even more like a cohesive design set? And these were the first ones that I drew after having one of those first conversations with you, David, when you rewrote the script and you sent it back to me, and I was like, this is awesome. And then I went right away and started drawing these characters as these teenage characters. And it was awesome, man. It was so cool. So great you came on board.
It was. I was pretty excited to see this stuff too, because it was super cool to see the change in direction, and to get these super fun characters that are going to have a lot to learn. It's like in our story, Gabriel is not an angel; he's a celestial, which again is like our fantasy interpretation of things, right? And so like in our story, like Gabriel's 1,700 years old, so he's a teenager, and that's kind of where he's at in maturity a bit, which is, it's super fun to play with, because he'll. He might quip, oh yeah, it's been a really long time. It's like 500 years ago that I did that or something, and Noach and Nemea are, it's going to be interesting when the three of them meet.
Yeah. We can move forward. So it's just a little more of just playing around with Nemea's design, and her whole look is inspired by Sumerian royalty. And of course we're doing our spin. So her culture isn't Sumerian, it's Kayanaran, but it's inspired by Sumerian, and then it's mixed with this sort of cyberpunk kind of vibe, because we wanted to push into the fantasy. So it's like, what happens when you take the Sumerian culture that we know of and you put it in a world where they were given advanced technology by fallen beings? What does that look like?
And I will say too, a lot of that stuff too is also inspired by real ancient mysteries. We still don't know how they made the pyramids. We still don't know how they made the 7 wonders of the world. These, we're kind of looking at real kind of ancient history and saying
if you guys knew the amount of hours that David and I have spent passing back and forth YouTube documentaries, it would be silly. It would be silliness.
Yeah. Spend a lot of time checking out YouTube documentaries on the ancient world.
Yeah. And so here's where you begin to explore, right? You got a character design. So what does it look like at all the different angles? I did these myself, but now we've got a team of artists that are working on designs, and you guys will see where it goes when you get, move out of just one amateur dude and go into like an actual team. Right. Yeah. So there's where you push it into style. So the studio that we're working with took my designs and pushed it into like even more of that anime style. Cause this studio, like, I mean, they've got people there that worked on Dragon Ball Z. Like they've got people that worked on real anime. And so they're able to even push that style even more. And so Knock, this is close to where Knock has landed actually.
Yeah, it is. It's a killer design, and I want to say too, just real quick, like you might be asking yourself, like, well, why push into like the anime style? And I would say, first and foremost, like it's because I love anime. I think it's a super cool style of animation. I love 2D animation. I just think it's beautiful. Like just the style of animation, that kind of thing. But then also there's another thing too, where it's like we asked ourselves again, who is this show for? And it's like, well, yeah, like, we want to make it for teens. I'm making this show for my teenage self that loves anime.
Who hasn't heard this story, right? Who hasn't heard these stories, and how do we get these stories in front of those people? And it's like, I mean, also like having teenagers myself, like, we live in a really interesting time, man, because like I grew up loving anime. I went to anime conventions. I've been known to cosplay, and now I have teenagers that do the same thing. It is still cool. It actually wasn't cool when I did it, to be honest. It was like kind of pretty nerdy when I did it, but now it's cool. I wish I was a teenager now because I'd maybe be cool. But what we know is that 8 out of 10 student-aged people watch anime. 8 out of 10. That's unbelievable. Yeah. So what a market and what an audience to reach and bring these stories to, So that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's super cool, and it just, I don't know. Like for me personally, there's a personal thing here where I get to make a show for my teenage self, which is like super cool.
I see Thomas, man. He said it. He said the word Anunnaki. Shh, don't say it, man. I love it.
So
dropping Anunnaki. So this is where then we begin to push the design, try different, where can you move in that style? What can we do? How sharp do we want it? How friendly do we want Gabriel to feel? What does he look like as we push different styles and try to land on one?
And I think too, like one thing that you could probably like note here too is that like, Gabriel's getting a little more fantasy look to him, and so did Knock in that last slide. And that's another thing too, is that we do want to make it clear that this is not Earth. We are on another planet. This is another world. Think of like just a fantasy story. Like, this is not, we're not trying to say this is like actual human history or anything like that. This is a fantasy story that we're inspired by.
What's funny is Luke here in the comments, Mr. Simmons, he said, this is how the story of Noah should be presented, not a cheery man in a boat with animals. Actually, because the problem, and here's why, one of the reasons why we actually felt that it was a good move to move into fantasy, because actually there are a lot of people that wouldn't accept the true story of Noah. Like all they know is that story of a man on a boat with animals, that nursery story. And so to bring this thing that, I mean, as I've spent time, just diving into the Hebrew, to the actual Torah text, and then the other texts that those same people would have been reading at the same time, like, dude, the story of Noah is phenomenal. It's in that world, the antediluvian world. If any one of us could time travel and go back to the actual Fertile Crescent antediluvian world, it would look and feel like a real fantasy world. In real life, I think it would. I think it would feel like a fantasy world because it would be so unlike anything you've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, no, for sure, and it's one of those things too, where like, like there's stuff in our show that might be kind of like magic a little bit, right? But it's like, if you look at, things from the Old Testament, like if people were around Moses and they saw Moses using his staff, and I'm like, that's a wizard staff. It's manipulating water. It's changing shape. It's turning the water into blood. I mean, it's doing all these crazy things. People would have said that's magic.
Yeah, Moses hits a rock with a staff and produces water. I mean,
Yeah.
if I were there, I would have been like, that guy's magic. We got a magic leader. Our leader's magic. Like, all right, so this is where we start to explore color. And, they're actually drawn by an awesome guy from the studio that we've been working with, who did actually work on Dragon Ball himself. So that's a cool little note. We can move forward. All right, so then you start to get into what are the designs, like where do you land? And so you can go forward to the next one. You get your lines, you get your shades. Go forward to the next one, and then you get your colors, and you begin to develop the actual look for the show. You can go forward. Yeah, so you go through the same process with all the characters, right? So we got there with Nemea, and we got her to a look that felt consistent. Knock, we get him to a place that feels consistent. You go forward, I think the next one, and then you get that great promo art that you finally land on promo art, where it's like, oh, there it is. The cast, the three, the trio, and look how great they look, all the work. Literally, 2 years of work to get to this. And it feels great, man.
Yeah, it really does. We hope you guys, like where things are landing. Like as you probably have been seeing throughout this whole thing, we've been asking really tough questions and just searching to get the best iteration of these characters to tell the best story. And that's something that we'll talk about. We'll talk about another live stream of like kind of our storytelling sensibilities. I've been mentioning Narnia and Lord of the Rings a lot, but we'll talk about the hero's journey, which is something that you see throughout the Bible, and it's something that you see throughout, I would argue, like just about every great story out there.
So we got a question that's actually a really good question. Is there, I believe it's Raquel, or Rachel. One of these, I'm just going to say everyone, Raquel, one of those are right. So, or not. And she's going to be like, no, none of those are right. Is there a special meaning behind the colors you chose for Gabriel? Yes. Daniel, the book of Daniel describes Gabriel. Gabriel is, describes a character, an angel that comes to Daniel. And basically it's described as a man with gold or bronze skin. And it says that his hair's white and his eyes are shining. And there are some other places that describe angelic characters with shining skin. And so I wanted to move for our story. I wanted to use that. And I loved the idea of these hero characters that are literally golden skinned or silver skinned or bronze skinned, just metallic skinned characters. As a kid, I always loved anytime they did like a special toy that was like metallic version of the toy. It was always like way cooler than the regular toy. And so I was like, well, what if you just started that way? What if you just had a whole bunch of heroes that like they were metal skinned? Like that would be cool, So
but now knocking the mayor not metal skin, but do you want to just talk real quick about how we landed on like kind of their look with like the red clay kind of thing?
Yeah. So as we moved into, more of a fantasy world, it was like, okay, how do we differentiate these characters even more? How do we make sure that this feels like a fantasy? And we started talking about like, well, what about like the human characters, the mortals, what could they be? And I was reminded of, and I think I told this a little bit last time, but I was reminded of the word Adam, which means red. Adam. It means man. It means mankind. It's the name of the first man. And it also means red, clay, right? Adama means earth, red earth. And so, essentially you could translate Adam's name as son of red earth, son of red clay. And so we just ran with it. We're like, what if that's like from a mythological standpoint, what if they are the people of the red clay? They're red clay people, made of clay from their perspective, maybe literally, right? But they've got this reddish skin, we wanted to push fantasy, so they've got the pointed ears. Like thinking like Hyrule, the mortals of Zelda, Hyrule, like they've got elf ears, which is cool, halfling ears, and so. But yeah, that idea of that, really getting that the ruddy complexion, as it's actually translated in scripture. David was considered ruddy. They called David a ruddy fellow, which just means red.
Yeah, sometimes, not always.
Yeah, no, ruddy. He's embarrassed.
Yeah.
So, okay.
All right.
Move to the next one.
Yeah.
Keep it rolling. All right. This is I just included some of the art that we got from our storyboard artist, because we were talking about characters, and I just wanted to show like some of the concept work that we are having done by an amazing dude named Christopher Parker. He is an extraordinary artist, an extraordinary storyteller, and we locked him in. He's on this team, and he's awesome. And every single he's got ideas and shots and things for every single moment.
Yeah. The dude is wickedly talented, and what you're seeing there are some of his ideas for the environments. So like those gray, like the gray on like images on the left, are some of the ideas for environments, and on the right, those are some studies that he's done looking at ancient world art. So again, like one of the things with our story is that we are playing in this antediluvian era. So there's going to be a lot of cultures that are, not great. Like there's going to be some dark cultures that our characters interact with, just like there were back then, and there's going to be cultures that are worshiping, God, like, little g gods. There's going to be cultures that are, believe in, monsters, giants, and all kinds of crazy things. Just like there were back then.
Just like in the actual Old Testament. I mean, our characters come across our heroes in the actual Bible, the biblical heroes, come across other cultures. Sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're not bad. They're just other cultures, and they worship other gods, right? Like that's the culture. There's Baal, and there's a lot of different gods that show up as beings that other cultures worship. Now, whether you believe those were fallen beings that were pretending to be gods, or whether they were uninhabited totems, that's fine. I mean, that's why we're playing in the fantasy world. Someone asked a good question here. Besides the Bible and historical texts, what else has inspired the development and writing of the show? What do you think, David?
I mean, I would definitely say just studying ancient history. I'll say like on a personal level, we developed this whole way that like our essentially like I don't have a better way to say it, so I'm just gonna say like our magic system. But the way that extraordinary things happen in our show is based on Nikola Tesla's ideas about the ancient Egyptians and frequencies and vibrations and stuff like that. And so I would say that the ancient world. I would say some of the writings of Nikola Tesla when it comes to the fantasy elements. It's like, okay, how do we create some like interesting fantasy stuff that we haven't seen before? And so those things were definitely inspiring. And then I would say like from a storytelling perspective. Definitely just like, classical storytelling. One of my favorite writers is a guy named Brandon Sanderson, and I've read almost all of his books. And he is so great at telling these epic stories. I mean, like really, truly epic stories where he beats the heck out of his characters. He throws them in the ditch and just like stomps on them. And they just creates this really incredible narrative of real heroes that come out of really tough situations. And it's just, the stories are they're awesome. They're super satisfying.
That's awesome.
And,
that's awesome.
So for me, that's one of my inspirations, you could say. Yeah.
I'd say I'm inspired by punk, like any kind of mash, like when you get like, steampunk, cyberpunk, like anytime you take these two things, especially one thing that is supposed to be one way, and then you take another thing that's another way, and you go, what if those two things existed in the world? One of the things that I think we're real excited about is playing around with our clerics, which are kind of like the wizards of our, Lord of the Rings style wizards, not Harry Potter wizards, but like they're the wise ones of our show. They're the mortals that still follow the ways of Ea, the creator. But we're playing around with this idea of like fantasy cowboys, Western inspired. Like, what if they were kind of Western inspired? What if they had some like, and so I mean, mashing that up. What's that happen when you get a wizard that kind of looks like a Western character? What's that look like? I can tell you, it looks very cool. Actually, like it looks very, very cool.
Yeah, and we're.
Good.
Oh, I was just gonna say. Sorry to cut you off. I was just gonna say that. Yeah, and we'll have some cool stuff to show pretty soon. I think end of next week. We'll have some pretty cool stuff to show on the clerics that Jason's talking about.
Well, that brings us to one point. Something someone asked about giants. Someone literally, like a bunch of people were talking in the comments. They're like, "Is there going to be giants? There ought to be giants in here." What do you want to say about that, David?
There's definitely going to be giants. There's going to be all kinds of giants. Yes.
Yeah. Giants are really our first season 1. Those are the bad guys. Those are really, for the most part, those are who the Gabriel's first fight in episode 1 is going to be with a giant, and a giant that has somehow entered into the unseen realm. Somehow it's gotten where it shouldn't be. And that brings us to Malacros, which I think we're going to talk a little bit. We don't want to reveal too much. This is a mysterious character, as he should be. But we're not going to lost you. We've got a really, really great plan for this character. Really.
I like it.
But Malacros is essentially inspired by a Sumerian soothsayer or Sumerian wizard. That's some of this over here. This is some Sumerian masks, and so this here in the middle is where we kind of landed. But David, do you want to talk about what Malacros does and how it connects to the giants?
Yeah, sure. So the very first episode, I think probably around, about the middle of the episode, I think. We just locked in the episode 1 script recently, and we're working on storyboards for it right now. But you're going to get to meet this guy for the first time, and you are going to see that he is extremely powerful, and he's in a very dark place. So one of the things we're going to talk about more is the trees of Ara. There's 12 trees of Ara. And these trees are incredibly powerful. They are, they're almost like atomic bombs, like nuclear reactors in this world. And Malacros has a tree that we're going to see in episode 1 that's in his tower. That's very strange. So I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, he's really powerful. He's a very mysterious dude. You will learn more about him watching the show. We'll probably share a little more about him in his live streams.
He essentially, he in one way or another, he has a hand in bringing these giants to the world. And so there are giants, and we call them the Chaos Giants. And so I think that the only other thing we should talk about probably is our big announcement, right?
Which the GalaxyCon?
Yeah, Galaxy. We're gonna be at GalaxyCon next week. I know we kind of talked about it last time, but like we really wanted to dive into it a little bit and just say like this is gonna be really cool. We're gonna be unveiling a whole bunch of stuff, and the whole thing is gonna be streamed. So we're actually like Angel's sending some people, and we're gonna have it recorded, and then like the day after or the next day after, like we're gonna stream the event that we do. So it won't be live, but we are gonna stream.
Yeah, and so that'll be happening next Friday. Yeah, and then we'll have a lot more stuff to share after that announcement. Some pretty cool stuff I think you guys will be excited about. And just some fun announcements, and then we'll continue. There'll be more announcements. We've got a lot of things planned. Just like as Jason was saying, we do have a plan for the whole series. We are not just making up the story as we go. So just in case anyone was wondering, we have planned out the series.
Yeah. Yeah. So there might be some giveaways. Like there's going to be some stuff. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Real quick before we sign off, someone asked about Eden. We're talking about Genesis. We're talking about, so we talk about Gabriel, like he is, essentially the steward or the guardian of Paradem. Paradem, if you do your research, I think you'll find that there's a connection between Eden and the word Paradem. So I'll just leave it to you guys to find that out. But look up the word Paradem and see where it takes you. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
and thanks so much.
There
Like
is an eternal tree in Paradem.
Well, yeah, and I want to say too, like, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you so much. I've been seeing the expressed interest come through, so thank you so much for that. That's amazing. Thanks so much for everybody who's supporting this project, supporting us in doing this. Yeah. This is a passion project, and we're so excited to create like an awesome show for you.
Yes, thank you guys so much for joining us. Next time we're going to talk about giants even more. Like we're going to make it a giants episode. Like we had already talked about that before, so I'm glad people were asking about it. We were like, what if we just talk about giants and Nephilim next time? So there you go. We'll do that. And so tune in next time to learn more about what we're doing with giants. All right. Thank you guys. And don't forget to...
Long ago, the world of Ara descended into chaos, and paradise was lost. False gods from the unseen realm deceived the people of Ara, stealing their birthright. Mortals roamed the wasteland, hopelessly searching for purpose. And that brings us to me, a celestial guardian, sent as a light piercing the darkness. My name is Gabriel.